Utilities and Telecommunications Committee for Thursday, January 20th. There is now a little note sheet I need to share with you that anyone presenting slides or sharing testimony should send all relevant files to audio-video requests at las.ks.gov with the committee in the subject line of the email. Audio-video requests with an S on the end at las.ks.gov. And if anyone is joining us via WebEx and wishes to speak, please use the hand raise function within WebEx to do that. And that is the conclusion of this note sheet that I need to share with you. Are there any bill introductions from any member of the committee? Seeing none. Are there any bill introductions from anyone in the gallery? All right. Pretty active group this morning. We have 5 presentations today in about an hour and a half, so I'll ask that everyone be mindful of the time. If you see me giving you one of these, that's your cue that I'm asking you to wrap up. If you keep running through that signal, I'll just turn your microphone off. There has to be some perks to being the chairman. So far, I think that's the only one. And this tiny hammer, so. So with that, we'll welcome Chuck Casely from the Chief Customer Officer from Evergy to the committee. Chuck, welcome back to Utilities Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Ranking Member Keither, if you're online with us this morning, it's a pleasure to be back here in this new year and talk a little bit about utilities and the company I love, which is Evergy. Appreciate the opportunity to address this group, this committee. I think there's some new members here, so I'll probably just start out. First of all, I'm not going to cover every slide. You got 29 slides here. A lot of good information, but we can't cover it all today. So we'd be happy to come to any member's office and talk in more detail if you have questions. And certainly I want to leave some time for questions after I walk through a few of these slides. But for those of you who are new on the committee, you might want to know just a little bit about Evergy. And so I'll start on slide 2 and just remind the committee that Evergy was actually formed by 2 Kansas companies, KCP&L and Westar, back in 2018. We are the largest utility in Kansas, second largest in Missouri. We've got a headquarters in Topeka and a headquarters in Kansas City. About 60 to 65% on any given month of our customers are Kansas customers, of our 1.7 million customers that we have. And we've got just a little bit under 5,000 employees. So if you look at page 2 of the slide deck, you'll see that that's roughly what our footprint looks like in both Missouri and Kansas. In Kansas, we go down west or out west to about the Hutch and Wichita area, and then down south to the border and up north to the border as well. And then in Missouri, we stretch up to the border and over to about Sedalia, Missouri. So that's our footprint. If you go to page 3 of the slide deck, you'll see there's really 3 core tenets to what we want to do as a utility company that serves this state. That is affordable rates, and we'll talk about each of these in a little more detail here in just a bit, but affordable rates, which to us means regional rate competitiveness. We'll talk again a little bit more about this, but what you should know is since the merger, our retail rates have gone down 5%. So while inflation is going up at a clip, well, it was just a little bit under 2%, now it's considerably more. Our rates from 2018 through the end of 2021 have gone down about 5%. Second cornerstone that we want to do is reliability. Right now, we're a solid second quartile in reliability, meaning number of outages and frequency of outages. Over the next decade, we'd like to get that up to tier 1 or the first quartile if we can. And then finally, sustainability. Sustainability is really important. Our investors, our insurers, and many of our customers want to see a more sustainable footprint. I think the thing to be mindful of here is the pace of the transition and making sure that it doesn't jeopardize reliability, that it doesn't incur extra cost, and that it's technologically feasible. Like I said, I'll talk a little bit more about each one of these and then take your questions. So if you go to page 5, of the slide deck, I thought I'd spend just a little bit of time talking about Winter Storm Uri. We saw Justin Grady of the Kansas Corporation Commission do his presentation last week. We thought it was a very thorough, comprehensive, and well-done presentation. And I can't say that any of the facts that he discussed or the recommendations he made we would disagree with. In fact, many of the questions this committee had and many of the recommendations that the KCC is making coming out of Winter Storm Uri, we've actually already done or are in the process of doing or agree with wholeheartedly. So given that, I thought today what I do with respect to Winter Storm Uri is give you an update on cost. When you talk to your constituents, when we talk to our customers, that's really the first thing that they want to talk about. And so I thought I'd give you an update as to where we are and what that looks like, particularly relative to other states that dealt with the same storm. So if you look at slide 5, what you'll see is if you live in Evergy, Kansas metro, which is really kind of the collar communities and a few of the rural counties right around Kansas City, customers who live in that part of our jurisdiction are actually going to see about $105 or more benefit per customer, meaning those customers will actually see a reduction in their rates over the next 2 years as a result of Winter Storm Uri. Evergy, Kansas Central, which is kind of everything outside of that Kansas City metropolitan area, and stretching down into Wichita and Hutch and to the borders in the north and the south, as we discussed earlier. If you're a customer in that jurisdiction, over the next 2 years, right now it looks like you will see a cost passed on to you of around $139. Now, I should mention a couple things. One, this isn't done yet. We have to work through the regulatory process with the KCC, and ultimately they will determine what those numbers are and how, over what period of time it gets distributed to customers. And the other thing I wanted to say is, so why is there a difference? Why is one part of our service territory getting a benefit and the other getting a cost? And the explanation is really pretty simple. If you live in Evergy, Kansas metropolitan region, you have a significant excess of generation, and particularly coal generation, as we sit here today, which means when the energy crunch hit and market prices went up, those customers had almost all of their electricity needs met, and in fact, that part of our jurisdiction was exporting to other parts of the Southwest Power Pool, coal-fired power. That gave them a benefit. Conversely, in Evergy, Kansas Central, they imported more power and were more affected by the prices, particularly of natural gas. Now, still way less, as we'll talk, than almost every other utility within the Southwest Power Pool, but that's why there was a cost differential. One thing that's important to remember, though, if you're an Evergy, Kansas Central member and you're irritated about this, this is a one-time event between the 12th of February and the 19th of February in 2021, and full year round, Evergy, Kansas Metro's rates are higher than they are in Evergy, Kansas Central. So for that one event, there was a benefit, but those customers are actually paying for that additional investment in generation. And so as a whole, on a year-round basis, Evergy, Kansas Central's rates are actually lower. The only other thing I'd point to you on this page is if you go through and you look at all the other states, you will see a range of incremental costs that customers of utilities in those states are expecting to see. And you can see for Oklahoma, it starts at $930. At Colorado, it's $190 and ranges up to $233. Iowa, $415. Texas, $664. What I would point out is that relative to all the other states, both of Evergy's service territories in Kansas did very, very well from a cost perspective. We were also one of the few utilities within the Southwest Power Pool that actually met all of our native load or all of the requirements to generate for our customers. So that's really Uri. And again, I'd be happy to take questions here in a little bit with respect to any other questions you would have on that. If you go now to page 7, I want to talk a little bit about the first pier of our strategy, which is affordability. Now, there's a lot of conversation about rates in this building. And there should be, because electric rates and energy rates generally are vital to the lifeblood of the economy and economic development in Kansas and really in any state. So when we talk about affordability, we are really talking about regional rate competitiveness. Now, I will be the first one to admit on the record multiple times and will not hide from the fact that between 2007 and 2016, both legacy companies of KCP&L and Westar had significant rate increases around the vicinity of 60% over that 10-year time period, mostly to comply with federally mandated environmental retrofits on coal plants and investing in generation and some transmission upgrades. That's basically what drove that. And that has taken the combined companies' rates from a place where they were at the very, very top of regional competitiveness and nationwide even better, to right on par with rates you would see in neighboring states. That's not good enough. And so what I would point out on page 7 is that the very reason that Evergy was formed, the combination of Westar and KCP&L, was to take these two companies, put them together, and drive as much efficiency savings as possible. And to date, we have driven about $420 million out of our cost structure that's been passed back over this time period to Kansas customers. What does that mean? Well, that means since the company was formed and we had our first rate cases in 2018, we have actually gone down as a retail rate about 5.1%. That's base rates, and that's all the adjustments that are done between base rates have taken our rates down 5.1%. Now, I can't say that other utilities aren't working on this, so if you look at our regional peers in states that are right around us, they are just under 1% down over that time period too. But what does that mean? Well, that means that it's inflation over that time period was 9.1%. And that means that what we have done as a combined company of Evergy is right about 5 times what our regional peers have. That is the definition of getting back to regional competitiveness. I think that's about what to see on this page, other than to say that we do expect to file a rate case in 2023, that those rates will be effective just before 2024, so still well over almost 2 years from now. What to know there is if everything holds the way we see it today, that rate increase, if you go back to our last time we asked for a rate review, which was 2018, will be about 0.5% a year on average increase. Again, that is juxtaposed against 2% inflation as of the end of 2021 over that time period, or about a quarter of what inflation is. So again, nobody likes a rate increase, nobody likes when costs go up, but compared to other consumer goods and inflation generally, we're at about 25% of that clip and doing very well relative to regional utilities. If you go to page 8 real quick, you'll just see that this implies that by 2024, 2025 time period will be first quartile in the United States for utilities with respect to cost. And one of the things that's discussed quite a bit around the Capitol halls here is what we call adjustments or riders outside of rate increases. So I'd just like to speak to that for just a minute. We've got a transmission and distribution charge, or TDC, and we've also got a fuel adjustment charge. This means that rates outside of rate cases a couple times a year are actually adjusted in smaller proceedings in front of the commission. One of the things that's been bandied about in years past is taking away that so that utilities only adjust rates in rate cases. I'd just like to point out, though, that since 2018, when Evergy was formed, if you look at the end of each year, meaning 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2021, those adjustments have actually netted out cost decreases for our customers. So if you look at where our rates were in 2018 for Evergy Kansas Central, because of those rate adjustments, we're down about $104 million in rates. And in Evergy Kansas Metro, we're down about $51 million in the amount of cost that's passed on to customers. So those adjustments have actually benefited significantly Kansas consumers over the last 4 years. And the majority of the adjustments, not all of them, but the majority of adjustments have been down. So now I'd like to skip, if that's okay with you, Mr. Chairman, to page 15 and just cover a little bit on reliability. When we think of reliability, we really think of three things. One is making the grid more resilient. What do I mean by more resilient? Well, I mean there are going to be outages. There's going to be extreme weather. There is going to be winds. There's going to be tornadoes. Kansas has extreme weather. What we want to do by making the system more resilient is reduce the amount of time once an outage occurs that it is actually, that it goes on. So reduce the time. Second thing is to really maintain the integrity of the system, which means replacing the infrastructure as it gets to a place where it's reached the end of its useful life. And then the third thing is to move from the second quartile to the first quartile of reliability in the United States. Because again, when companies are looking to locate here and as our lives are more dependent on electricity than ever, really being at the top quartile of utilities is something that we would like to be. Why do I have you on page 15 and then also on page 17? You will see sometimes stakeholders within the Capitol will try and limit the investment, or they will talk about investment not being needed. But I'd just like to point out, these are just facts. These are the average asset age for different parts of our transmission and distribution system. And as you can see here, 50–60% of our transmission and distribution system have reached 80% or better of their depreciable life. Okay? That says that if we want to maintain and improve reliability, these are things we absolutely must invest in. I would wager that most folks in this room, if we told you that the depreciable life on the transformer that served your house or the pole that runs in your backyard or into your community to serve that was 5, 6, 7 years over its projected useful life, you would probably want us to start thinking about replacing it. And a big part of what we're doing over the next 4 or 5 years is doing just that. So if we can skip ahead to page 20 now and just talk about this real quickly. You know, sustainability is something, and carbon reductions is something that comes a little bit of a buzzword and can get people on different sides pretty quickly in this building. But what I'd like to point out is that the cost of financing our operations these days, the cost of insuring our plants, the cost of doing business is considerably less if when you interact with the big banks and you interact with institutional investors, you are able to show a path toward decarbonization. Many of our biggest customers now have goals or mandates, particularly if they have federal contracts. And so as a general rule, from an economic competitiveness standpoint and from a cost standpoint, sustainability is something that every utility in the United States is dealing with. Again, from our perspective, the important thing is to maintain reliability and put cost first. And so on page 20, you'll see that since 2005, Evergy has actually reduced their CO2 emissions by more than half, and that compares favorably to almost all of the peers that are around us, except for one located in Iowa, who is considerably ahead of us. But again, it's a focus with an understanding that it has to be paced to technology, it has to maintain reliability, and it has to keep cost in the forefront. I drove over, I live in Johnson County. I drove over here on 70 today and noticed that the Lawrence Energy Center was cranking at full tilt. You will notice that earlier in 2020 and then at the beginning of 2021, we forecasted actually closing that facility entirely, just shuttering it and being done. As a result of Winter Storm Uri, though, what we're going to do is take the very, very old coal-fired units there and completely retire them, but we are maintaining that facility to run on natural gas because on days like today, we actually need, and it helps improve reliability. That's a great example of a reduced carbon footprint but still there to support the grid on a day when I walked in this morning, it said it was 5 degrees here, and that's before you factor in wonderful Kansas wind. So anyway, so that's really sustainability. Just a couple of last comments. I'd love to get some questions. If you'll go to slide 25, one thing that I think is interesting is there are some stakeholders within, under the dome, so to speak, who every year kind of say that the legislature has to take action now to maintain regional rate competitiveness of our electric and gas companies. And what I find interesting is this legislature has actually been more active on utility issues since 2018 than almost any other legislature in the country. What do I mean by that? Well, we've done an electric rate study. Many of those recommendations in that rate study have either been implemented by the Kansas Corporation Commission already, or 2 of them were the subject of legislation passed in 2020 and 2021. My point is, I don't want anybody to suffer under the impression that this legislature and this body in particular hasn't been on top of this issue. It is certainly one of the more discussed and legislated issues since 2018, and to the betterment of energy policy in this state. If we could go to page 26, just a note, and particularly for new members of the committee, I also don't want folks to think that because we are a monopoly, that we are not answerable and we are not fully transparent to our constituencies. I put a few facts on this page because I think most people probably don't know this, but when we file for a rate review, which again we haven't done since 2018, but when we do, that filing has the last one had more than 11,000 pages. It's a huge filing. More than 750 individual documents. All of our financial records are disclosed. We can hide nothing from the commission. And all of our managerial decisions, presentations, emails, it's complete transparency. Nothing is hid from the commission. And then, if that's not enough, anybody who is a party to that proceeding gets to ask essentially discovery to us. They get to ask us any question they want, which come in the form of data requests. And our last rate case has had over 600 questions from stakeholders that we responded to. That's good. That's transparent. That is what we do in order to be a regulated monopoly in the state of Kansas. I also just wanted to point out that it doesn't stop every 3 or 4 years when we file a rate increase request. It's an ongoing thing. On an annual basis, we file 154 different reports and compliance documents with the commission. That was the last count from 2021, and you can look at all the topics that covers. Last thing I'd like to talk about, Mr. Chairman, is if we could just go to slides 28 and 29 and look at that generally. Look, we're a little bit like a farmer or a paper producer. We're only as good as how we are a steward to the land that we farm or the timber that we take. If we completely deplete it, and in our case that means raising rates to a place that customers don't want to locate here, particularly businesses that employ people and pay the taxes that run the states and the essential services, we can't survive. But the fact of the matter is, from an economic development competitiveness standpoint, Kansas is doing really well, even as compared to our regional peers. We are, I believe, the only investor-owned utility in the United States that has sought out and put together a team that's accredited by the International Economic Development Association. And every single project that looks at Kansas within our service territory, and frankly, some that are outside of it, we work hand in glove with the state to try and recruit businesses here. If you look on slide 27 or 28, I believe, you will see that 2021, notwithstanding the pandemic, was a very successful year for Kansas. And in our service territory, outstripped every other state that we bordered with. So Oklahoma, Iowa, Nebraska, all of those we beat. Kansas, in our service territory, got more of the economic development than Missouri did. The only one that you might be able to say, once you adjust for the service territory side, that did as well or better would be Colorado. And Colorado's got a very thriving tech industry and a few other things right now that are just blowing up there. My point is, economic development is job number one for us, and we want to make sure that rates as a part of that maintain our competitive advantage. Mr. Chairman, those are my prepared remarks, and I'd happy to take questions.
Mr. Casely, questions for this conferee? Representative Schreiber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chuck. I was wondering if you can kind of briefly address issues that are common throughout or any industry right now, supply chain and workforce. What things are you seeing through Evergy about supply chain issues or workforce availability?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what I would say is it's not desperate, but it's not normal. Things like conductors or the wires that carry the electricity, transformers, critical parts of infrastructure are not getting delivered at a clip that would maintain inventories, and probably at least once a week we get calls from neighboring utilities asking if we have a little bit of this or a little bit of that. I know just one of the areas that's within my purview at Evergy is meters, and most of the meters are manufactured in Mexico and brought up by rail to the United States. Significant delays in delivering meters now. We are not in a place where we're in a desperate situation, but I would say we are in a place of heightened awareness, where something major happened in the United States that demanded a lot of those resources, like a hurricane, for example. When the hurricane hit the southeast earlier this year, there were calls that went around the United States to see what they could cobble together in terms of material. So it's something that is an ever-present issue. It is not something that is negatively impacting us yet, and we've done everything we can to work with multiple suppliers and bring in what we can. But I would not, it would not be honest to say that it's not a concern and something we talk about on a weekly basis.
Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the central region, $139, will they add like $12 a month for a year? Or?
Yeah, so what will happen is we will work with the Kansas Corporation Commission. We'll essentially present the entirety of what the incremental fuel cost for that region is, and then they will look at an adjustment and spreading it over multiple months. And my suspicion is what we have asked for provisionally and had some good dialogue with is it'd go over a 2-year time period.
You know, when you look at the pole replacement and so forth, will you be able to do all of that and still go down 5% as far as the rates? And
yeah, so the 5% decrease is from, you know, the 2018 time period when we had a decrease in our rates, and then all the adjustments since then. No, when we come in 2023, we will be asking for a rate increase. But if you take what we project that increase to be and take it from our last rate increase all in, it'll be about 0.5% a year. We are still looking at driving out cost. So we just filed a rate increase request, for example, in Missouri. We're required to come in every 4 years there. So we've been 4 years out, and we came in and filed an increase request. When you look at that request, we've invested billions of dollars in infrastructure. 50% of that or better was offset by cost reductions and ongoing cost decreases. So that's still going to be a focus. Will we be able to keep a 5% down over 3 or 4 years in perpetuity? No. A lot of that's driven by significant synergies by putting two big companies together, but there's still a lot we can do to mitigate, and we will continue to do that. And again, through 2024, 25, we look at about 0.5% a year going back to 2018.
it does look like the infrastructure was in great need. I appreciate the coal burning plants that you're doing what you're doing, because instead of tearing them down, let's have them just in case. So I appreciate that. Thank
Representative Delperdang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kind of expound on what the vice chair was getting into, but could you mentioned earlier the meters are manufactured in Mexico. What about transformers, breakers, et cetera? Are they in the U.S. or are they sourced abroad?
Some are manufactured in the U.S., but again, disproportionately transformers, conductors, things like that are made in Mexico. So that's where a lot of that inventory comes from.
What I was leading to, and I don't know why I'm getting these, but I'm getting lots of questions lately about EMP or the security of the network, so to speak. Is the electric network or transmission, is it hardened within Evergy? Could we sustain a hard solar flare that could possibly take out 100 transformers? If so, are we going to be sitting here just like the automotive industry waiting for a year for replacement transformers?
So there's a lot in there. I think there's really two things there. One, how would the facilities handle that? And second, what if it did happen? Look, I think a real electromagnetic pulse that would hit a big swath of the country could have, depending on the severity and the focus, I mean, there's a whole bunch of different factors. It could have a significantly difficult impact to utilities. Evergy is not any different than any other utility in the United States. There's no way that we know of today to completely harden against that. Now, we can take some precautions, and we can build our facilities in a way that you can recover more quickly, and that's again talking about resiliency. But a strong electromagnetic pulse is a vulnerability to any electric system, worldwide. Having said that, if we had a giant natural disaster right now, as a country, utilities would be going around and trying to source, the necessary equipment. Again, I don't think it's in a desperate situation. It's just not at what we would call a normal and comfortable level. And it's something that, hopefully we'll see some relief for. And I think also one of the things the pandemic has taught many industries within the United States is the benefit of maybe onshoring or bringing back some of that critical infrastructure, whether it's the manufacture of car chips, whether it's the manufacture of vaccines and different medicines. A lot of that is done overseas, and I think you'll see a concerted effort to onshore some of that over the next decade, is my guess.
If I may, one more. I look at page, I think it's 15, and just am concerned when I look at the life expectancy years listing versus Kansas Central or even Kansas Metro, and it looks like a good chunk of our equipment is beyond the life expectancy. So I understand you're updating, you're replacing as you go, but is it normal to have items that may have a 40-year life expectancy with an average of currently 52 years? So we're 25% beyond, so to speak.
So that's a great question. Evergy Kansas Central is probably actually the best positioned of the 4 different rate jurisdictions within the Evergy company family. And one of the reasons for that is the transmission and distribution charge that allows us to invest in transmission and distribution in that area, and recover those costs in between rate cases. So relative to the United States and relative to the rest of Evergy's rate jurisdictions, Evergy Kansas Central is actually ahead of the game. That's one of the reasons we're focusing on our Missouri properties and our Kansas Metro properties. What I will tell you is that there's if it ain't broke and it's not clearly damaged, utilities in the United States, don't necessarily go and replace poles. You can see damage. We go out and we test poles on an annual basis. The point of these statistics here are just to say, when people say that there's no need to invest in the infrastructure, bear in mind we've got hundreds of thousands of poles and tens of thousands of miles of conductors. This is their asset age, and it's prudent to keep investing and replacing those just as general maintenance to the health and integrity of the system. I've got a pickup truck, and it's an old diesel pickup truck. It's got 350,000 miles on it. And any corporation in the United States would tell you that should be depreciated off their books and is past its useful life. It isn't. It still works great with general maintenance. But the point is, you do have to keep investing in it. And one of these days, before it breaks down, I'm going to have to replace it. And that's kind of the same. That's kind of the same theory that we operate under, and every utility operates under. We want to get to tier 1, and we want to get some of these asset life ages down. And that's a big part of what we're doing now in our investment strategy.
Representative Turner, and then Carmichael's on deck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Say, as I Appreciate your presentation, and as I heard you say, the folks in the greater metro area are going to benefit actually by Uri because they had an excess of generation, largely coal generation. And as we've heard testimony over the last several days, it was pointed out, that wind and solar aren't dispatchable, and what really came around were the fossil fuels that were supporting that. So as I look at your shift, you've got a pie graph here on page 19 that kind of shows what the pie pieces are, but then by elsewhere, you mentioned by 2030, we're going to be so much different, and by 2045, we're going to be net zero. So I just wonder what that pie graph, how those pieces will shift, and how it looks like from page 23 that the retirements of coal are going to be replaced by solar and wind. So that pie graph's going to look a whole lot different, and how that affects what reliability may be in 2030 and 2045. Thank you.
Yeah, so a couple things. Going back to an earlier comment about maintaining our coal fleet for times when we need them, I think that's going to be a big part of, those coal plants are going to remain around in the foreseeable future. We can't get to net zero. Anybody tells you this otherwise is just not telling you the truth. We cannot get to net zero without one of two things happening. Either significant improvements and advancement in energy technology and specifically storage, and/or a resurgence of nuclear power in the United States. That's the only way you get there. And when we talk about 2045 and net zero, those are two caveats that are placed into that. The interesting thing, this is maybe my favorite conversation, particularly over a cocktail to have, because there's a lot of people that absolutely know what they know and will tell us, how to run the grid, having never actually tried to balance the grid in their career. So let me give you some thoughts on Uri specifically. I think you remember Justin Grady when he was here said about 80%, just a little bit under, it was about 78.5% of the electricity from February 12th to February 19th that we provided our customers came from coal and nuclear. And there's this great conversation out there that goes like this. Well, Evergy was only counting on 12% of their wind energy, so wind wasn't really the problem. Well, that's a little bit of a disingenuous argument. And the reason for that is that it implies that if you had enough wind energy, you could just backfill that amount of coal. Well, we did a little math. And anybody care to guess how much wind energy it would take to backfill our 4,000 or 5,000 megawatts worth of coal and nuclear? 23,000 megawatts of wind. Now, I know that doesn't sound like a lot to people who don't deal in megawatts and kilowatts and volts and VARs every day. So let me create a picture of what that would look like. There's 7,300 megawatts of wind installed in Kansas today, which would mean in order to cover what coal and nuclear did, you would have to have all the installed capacity of Kansas, Oklahoma, Colorado, Nebraska, and Iowa, in addition to what Evergy has. Care to guess what the cost of that would be? $41 billion, or roughly twice the assets on our books today, and almost 3 times our market cap. Not something you would like to see. Now, does that mean Evergy is against wind? No, you will see a transition where we start to layer in wind, okay? Very important, because when it's blowing, it is the cheapest cost of electricity out there, and it has zero environmental footprint, and it is a huge part of attracting big companies to Kansas. So it's vitally important. But the change has to be paced to technology, and as long as we don't have storage technology or a resurgence of nuclear energy at a competitive price rate, we need to keep those coal plants around, natural gas plants around, in order to handle a day like today.
Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can't help but see my old friend, Mr. Nichols, sitting behind there in the audience, and I certainly look forward to hearing the rest of the story soon from the consumer organizations, as I know you will accommodate. Mr. Casely, I'm not an expert in rate making. It's been nearly 40 years since I've appeared before the KCC, so please bear with me if my questions are not properly phrased. As I understand it, the STP, the Sustainability Transformation Plan that was authored and recommended by the committee, I think 2 by the Strategic Operating Committee. 2 of those members were from Elliott Management, and I think 2 of those members were directors, one of whom, Mr. Basham, is now retired. But the projection under the STP was of earnings growth for the period 2019 through 24 of about 8% per year. Am I correct on that?
I didn't hear the percent a year you said. I'm sorry.
EIGHT, 8% per year, roughly.
That, I think it was 6 to 8
You're correct.
percent.
You
is
are
the
correct.
range.
You are correct. 6 to 8. I was being optimistic. That means 5 years out, you'd project earnings growth of about 47% as compared with today. Is that roughly correct when we compound that 8% rate?
You know, Representative Carmichael, I'm a recovered attorney, so math ain't my best strong suit. But no, 6 to 8% a year compound annual growth rate is what we said when we presented that to the commission.
I don't think that was the rate. I think it was a flat rate, but at any rate, what do you think what do you project the earnings growth is going to be under the STP over the next 5 years?
Again, we're targeting a 6 to 8% compound annual growth rate. That's what we're looking at, and I would love to say that optimistically it'll be at the 8% end. Usually doesn't happen that way,
Sure.
but again, that's the target that we've told our
Shareholder.
investors and our
you.
consumers.
Thank you.
Notwithstanding that, though, it's, you're looking
Our
at
time
to
is
achieve
limited,
that
sir,
range
please.
sorry.
Shareholder return is supposed to go up over that same period by as much as 11%, I think it is, compounded.
I'd be happy to come to your office and walk through it. Without all the figures in front of me, it's difficult
Okay, well, then
to do that math.
Let's move to something you did talk about in your testimony. That's the 5% decrease in rates. A large amount of that is, of course, attributable to changes in the federal tax code occasioned by President Trump and the Congress, as well as exemptions that the Kansas legislature gave you so that those taxes are no longer part of the rate base. Isn't that where a large part of that 5% decrease came from?
I believe the Tax Cut and Jobs Act probably, and I'll have to go back and verify this, but it was probably about 15 to maybe 18, most 20% of the reduction. And then the state income tax was by comparison significantly less than that. So maybe a third of this has come from tax cuts. Things I would mention that, were supported by
Thank
the
you, sir.
utility study, which we supported, and we supported
Thank you,
those
sir.
tax cuts as well.
Thank you, sir. Finally, Mr. Chairman, with respect to the composition of your board of directors and your strategic operating committee, as I understand it, about 4 of the 13 directors at Evergy, and it fluctuates depending on resignations, et cetera, but about 4 of the 13 are now Bluescape or Elliott Management affiliated directors. Is that correct?
Well, so first of all, we don't have a strategic operations committee anymore. That was disbanded at least a year ago, maybe
And I
longer.
apologize, I misspoke. I meant to say your board of directors, not your
Yep.
strategic operating committee.
Well, the
4 of
strategic
13
operating
are
committee-
now Elliott or Bluescape people, correct?
Yeah, no, there is one from Bluescape, a gentleman by the name of John Wilder, who's a 20-year CEO in the utility industry and invested his own money in Evergy. The others, no, they are not affiliated with Elliott in any way. One, Senator Mary Landrieu, conservative Democrat from a natural gas state of Louisiana, with the current administration, works very well to help us navigate what's going on in Washington right now. And then the other is a gentleman by the name of Paul Keglevic, who again worked for a utility in Chicago, and then as an accountant for utilities for many, many years. So they're industry experts and have no financial tie whatsoever to Elliott.
I'm very sorry, Mr. Chairman, that I was so mistaken. I read the Kansas Reflector and I see them as a much more independent source than Evergy's representative. There's much more that we could ask, Mr. Chair, but I know the committee has already occupied 44 minutes of its 90 minutes. Thank you.
Are there further questions from any committee member? I have a couple. Yesterday or Tuesday, we heard from electric co-ops and we heard from municipal providers Can you provide some kind of 101 context for the difference between Evergy and how it operates and who its constituencies are versus co-ops and municipal utilities in the state?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. So we are what's called an investor-owned utility, which means we raise capital in the private equity and bond markets, and we invest that. And we've got a certificated service territory, which is, from a practical perspective, the utility industry is the most capital-intense industry in the United States, both to invest in the equipment and then to maintain it. And so policymakers just like yourselves long time ago decided two sets of lines running down the street probably wasn't a good thing. And so you've really got three different kinds of utilities. One is investor-owned, that's us. We get a service territory, but for having that monopoly service territory, the proxy for that is that we have to be heavily regulated and our rates are set by the Kansas Corporation Commission. Then you've got cooperatives. One of the things that is true about capitalism and the economy in general is that investment dollars chase places where they can recover it and make more money sooner. And for electric industries, that's always going to be a more densely populated area. So rural America, 70, 80 years ago was being left out. And so it was actually former President Johnson, when he was in Congress, they formed what was called rural electric co-ops, which were government subsidized infrastructure investment to go out and to really build electrical infrastructure in the rural parts of America. And those companies exist today, and the difference between us and them, they are also a monopoly, but within their service territory, they are governed by all of their customers. You get a vote as a customer to elect a board and a management team, and that's who sets the rates. Presumably, if they're doing a bad job, their customers will vote them out. And then the third kind that you spoke of, Mr. Chairman, is municipal utilities. There are a handful, actually a significant handful of municipalities within the state of Kansas and around the United States that elect to be their own electric utility. And essentially what happens there usually is that the council that's elected and the mayor serve as their kind of board of directors, at least indirectly. And then there's usually a management team and sometimes a board that's appointed by a mayor or council to serve as the governance structure there. All of their funds come from, municipal coffers and bonding authority and stuff like that. So it's an entirely government-run organization. The one thing I would say, interestingly enough, is that notwithstanding that, there's still a lot of coordination and interconnection between those entities, both from helping when there's storms, but more importantly, it takes a lot of money, billions and billions of dollars to build nuclear plants, coal plants, wind farms. And so Evergy is in a position of selling electricity to a lot of those entities in contracts so that they don't actually have to generate their electricity themselves. So very high level, Mr. Chairman.
And as an investor-owned utility, you have investors, you have a fiduciary duty to your investors and stockholders to make profit.
That is true.
And that's true of any business that has investors and shareholders. But as a utility, you have another duty or another layer of regulation that comes into effect in terms of you can't just price power at whatever point Evergy chooses. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And the regulation and governance of the utility for the sake of the public in Kansas is accomplished through the KCC.
That is correct.
Okay. I want to make clear that there's a difference, and we're working on context and putting IOUs in context with the other entities that we've heard about and trying to place that within the matrix of our understanding of utility. So I appreciate your responses to the questions today. I appreciate the testimony. I know it took a little bit longer than we thought, but we had a lot of questions, and I felt like we should cover those. So thank you, Mr. Casely, for coming, and we'll hope to see you back later this session when we talk about rate making.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee.
Okay, next we're going to go to Whitney Dameron with Liberty Utilities. As I said, that took a little longer than we thought, but we are going to, if we don't get to someone who's on the agenda today, I think most of these folks are regulars in our committee. We will get you more time before the committee so we can talk about the natural gas industry and what's going on there. So don't fret that all is lost if we come up against time this morning. Whitney, sorry, before you start, Mr. Armstrong from Atmos. Are you here? Okay. Have you traveled to be here? Okay. So you and Mr. Casely came over together from Johnson County? All right. Thank you very much. Whitney, go ahead. Whitney Dameron with Liberty Utilities. Happy to have you here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'll do my best to get you back on schedule. Even though Liberty is the second largest investor-owned electric utility in the state of Kansas, they have a very small footprint in Kansas. As a matter of fact, there are only 2 investor-owned electric utilities in Kansas. But for those of you who are old as me, we're like Avis, we're trying harder. Probably 2 people in the room that know what I'm talking about. Liberty was acquired, those of you may remember Empire District Electric Company, which was actually a Kansas corporation at the time, headquartered in Joplin, was acquired by Algonquin Power and Utilities Corporation around 2017. That's when that transaction was completed. Algonquin is headquartered in Canada. They have a U.S. subsidiary. They operate what was the old Empire District, which is now a 6-state region called the Central Region for Liberty Utilities, of which Kansas is a part of that. There's about 10,000 electric customers in the state of Kansas, located in the very southeast corner. On this committee, Representative Smith is the closest we have as far as someone from the legislative delegation, but actually very small footprint in Kansas, even though the company does the utility services they provide include gas and electric, water, wastewater, and some fiber optic. Their assets in Kansas are devoted to electricity only. Liberty has about $500 million in capital assets. There's some informational pages included with my remarks. The 3rd page talks about Kansas. That does not include the Neosho Ridge wind farm, I believe, which brings that number up from 300 to over $500 million in assets. Liberty and its predecessor, actually, Empire, was very proactive in getting into wind and purchase power agreements. It was, I believe, around 2005 that Empire entered into a purchase power agreement for a wind farm in Butler County, Kansas. They subsequently entered into an agreement with the Meridian Way wind farm in Cloud County. And then a couple of years ago, Liberty took the step to substantially increase their footprint in wind and sited 2 wind farms in Missouri, totaling 300 megawatts of nameplate power, and then 300 megawatts in Kansas and the Neosho Ridge wind farm in Neosho County, Kansas. Liberty has gone down that path not necessarily because they're focusing on green energy, not because the board of directors and the CEO became woke to the coal industry and the like. They did it because for them and for their customers and their region, it makes good business sense. They invested well over $1 billion into those assets, continue to invest in their system. That investment in those 3 wind farms is projected to save ratepayers about $170 million over the next 20 years and closer to $300 million over the next 30 years. So for them and their mix and their customer base, it just makes good sense. Liberty does have a combined cycle natural gas power plant located in the corner of southeast Kansas in Riverton. And then, as you see on the informational sheets, they have about 40-some employees that actually reside and work in Kansas. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to respond to questions. We generally live in the shadow of historically Westar, KCPL, now Evergy. We're moving up. We were number 3, now we're number 2. But I would say, you know, the people that work at Liberty have great respect for the people that work at Evergy and vice versa. The engineers talk all the time. We've got a conference call tomorrow talking about some environmental issues and the like. And certificated territories help people get along a lot better. We're not competing for customers, so to speak. With that, Mr. Chairman, I will stand for questions. Thank you.
Great. Questions for Mr. Dameron? Representative Carmichael, your hand is still up. Did you want to ask about the Liberty Board of Directors, or is that a holdover from the last?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I was asleep at the switch. Reading 3 hours of KCC filings this morning has not made me any wiser or more alert. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions from anyone in the room? No? All right. I think you got off easy.
It's quite a day getting a pass from Representative Carmichael. I do appreciate it, Mr. Chairman.
You bet. Thank you, sir. Next up, we have Patrick Vogelsberg from Kansas Gas Service. Patrick, welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'll try to be mindful of time, understanding that the next three up are the three IOU gas companies. And we somewhat coordinate a little bit so that we don't overly duplicate. But my name is Patrick Vogelsberg, and I'm Manager of Government Affairs for Kansas Gas Service. You just heard from him. I did want to point out that Whitney Dameron is also a contract lobbyist for us, and he's been with us a long time. So slide 2 goes into a little bit about Kansas Gas Service. We have 645,000 customers in Kansas across 360 communities. You can see this graphic where those communities lie within Kansas. We have communities roughly in the eastern 2/3 of the state. This does make us the largest natural gas distributor in Kansas. We have 13,000 miles of pipeline and distribution line. That includes our transmission line that we operate that runs roughly from southwest Kansas up through northeast. That helps us serve the communities along the way. We have about 1,000 employees in the state. These are people that we rely on every day, and we certainly relied on them for their hard work during Winter Storm Uri last year. On the next page, slide 3, as a reminder, Kansas Gas Service is a division of One Gas. One Gas is a 100% regulated natural gas utility, provides natural gas distribution services to more than 2.2 million customers in Oklahoma, Kansas, and Texas. Our divisions are Oklahoma Natural Gas, which is the largest natural gas distributor in Oklahoma and regulated by the Oklahoma Corporation Commission. Texas Gas Service, which is the 3rd largest by customer count, which is regulated by the Texas Railroad Commission, and then, of course, Kansas Gas Service, which is regulated by the Kansas Corporation Commission. On slide 4, I bring this to your attention. There's a lot going on here, but the purple is where our company has customers, and the blue areas are the geological formations where oil and gas are produced. The importance here is it demonstrates that our footprint is close to where there's a good deal of production, which helps with providing natural gas at reasonable prices. On page 5, Mr. Casely talked a little bit about certificate areas. This map on page 5 is a little bit difficult to see in this representation, but it is available on the Kansas Corporation Commission's website, and you can zoom in to see. But through here in the light green, you can see where Kansas Gas Services communities are, those 360 communities, roughly running from southwest Kansas up through north central Kansas and then to the eastern side of the state. And I'm sure our friends over at Black Hills and Atmos will talk about their certificated areas. Also within that would be the municipal systems and Midwest Energy, which is also a gas cooperative. All right, on slide 6, I wanted to give a little bit of a wellhead to burner tip 101 presentation, just to show where an LDC, which is local distribution company like Kansas Gas Service, lines up. So here's a very simplified illustration of the natural gas value chain in Kansas. Mr. Cross with Cuyahoga presented where producers are located, which is at station number 1 here at the beginning. Mr. Gillespie with One Oak talked about the midstream, which they appear in stages kind of 1 through 3, from gas gathering, processing, storage, and then transporting. Number 3 is where the local distribution company comes up, and that's where we're at. This is where we take custody of gas. So number one, when natural gas is in a transmission pipeline, it reaches a natural gas utility. It normally passes through what we call a city gate or gate station. Utilities frequently have these along within their systems at many different locations and from several different pipelines. And so these these gate stations serve three purposes. What we're doing is we're reducing pressure down from transmission levels, which can run anywhere from 200 to 1,500 pounds, and we're getting it down more into the quarter-pound to 200-pound distribution range. You can picture this in your mind. Just imagine a car driving on an interstate system at interstate speeds, and as you come into the town and then you're going into your driveway, you're reducing that speed. The size of the streets is coming down. Same thing with the gas distribution system. When that gas is entering the home, it's just creeping in there. Odorant is applied, so this is mercaptan, that is that rotten egg smell, so that citizens and customers know if there's a leak. They're familiar with that, and they can make the appropriate calls. And finally, at the gate station, we're measuring flows to determine the amount of gas that's being received by our utility. Moving into the home, we have service lines that run off of mains into homes. These are very small diameter plastic lines that are usually an inch or less. When the gas passes through that meter, it becomes the property of the customer. As a reminder, it's something that we bring up from time to time. KGS, Kansas Gas Service, and the other gas utilities do not make money off the actual price of gas, the cost of gas. We purchase that gas and we deliver it to our customers' homes and businesses. The customer's bill includes both the cost of our service to deliver to the customer's home or business and the cost of gas used. So the price of gas is not marked up by Kansas Gas Service. If you want an example of one of our bills and a breakdown of what all the different components are, you can go out to the KCC's website or our website and see a good representation of that goes through service charge and delivery charge and GSRS charges. Next, I want to move into customer types. We have residential, commercial, industrial customers. Another distinction I think that came out during Winter Storm Uri is that distinction between gas sales customers, which are primarily residential customers, and small commercial customers. These are customers that Kansas Gas Service procures their gas for them. This is distinguishable from transport customers or individually balanced customers that are using a third-party marketer and going out on the market, purchasing gas, and then using our system to transport that gas to their home, to their business. So with residential customers, I think we're all familiar with the uses for residential natural gas. On the commercial side, you see similar uses for natural gas, but just larger amounts. Some of these commercial customers are transport customers, or as I mentioned, individually balanced transportation customers that are out there working with a third-party marketer to procure their gas. Lastly, move into industrial users. These are our largest users, and these customers are likely procuring their own natural gas. On slide 12 here, just a little bit more on those transportation customers that you can see to and large commercial users are largely to be those transport customers. So with that, I did want to, before I close and hand this off to my fellow peers, I did want to just mention, make a comment about the winter storm. Winter Storm Uri certainly brought challenges to everyone involved in the energy, delivering energy in the Midwest. And you heard from Justin Grady just last week, that I think provided a pretty comprehensive review on the causes and cost and impacts from the storm. Kansas Gas Service, we are still engaged in proceedings right now with the KCC, and there's many interveners within those dockets, and we're working to further mitigate the overall impact from that winter storm. And in Justin's presentation, I think he gave you a status report of where we're at in those proceedings. I do want to point out that that storm, while challenging, I think demonstrated the operational reliability of the natural gas system in the state. Kansas Gas Service has 645,000 customers, and we lost approximately 85 service to 85 of those accounts out of 645,000. And that was really on the tail end of the storm when we saw a large user ramping up consumption and pulled down pressure on the system, and they were just temporarily out. So I think, and that's a credit to our employees that were working around the clock to make sure that we did not lose service during that storm, which would have been, I think, catastrophic to human life and to the property damage, which we've seen in other places in the country during that storm. I did want to end by just thanking the legislature in passing the securitization legislation from last year, and very quickly. As I was recalling the first hearing when putting in the extraordinary fuel cost and utilizing the securitization as a financial tool, that first hearing was on March 17th. And 5 weeks later, on April 22nd, that legislation was signed into law. I think it shows what this legislature can do very quickly to respond to an emergency situation. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions or step aside and let my fellow gas companies come up.
Thank you, Patrick. I think since you've all kind of coordinated a little bit, we'll hear from as many of you as we can, and then we'll save questions for the end. And members, you can let us know which person you're asking your question of when we get done with these. So thank you, Patrick. We'll call Bart Armstrong from Atmos Energy. Mr. Armstrong? Thanks for coming all the way from Olathe this morning.
Yes, yeah. Well, I appreciate Patrick. He did about half my slides for me, so I will probably give some time back. So good morning to you all, though. Yeah, my name is Bart Armstrong. I'm the president of our Colorado, Kansas division. Been in Olathe about 14 years, been with Atmos about 30 years. So about half my career has been here in Kansas. And my previous role, I was over just specifically the state of Kansas operations. So I've been here quite a while and love it and glad I'm here. So we do appreciate the opportunity to be here. And truly, I do have 13 slides, and Patrick did do a high level, kind of talked about what I will too. So I'll move through them pretty quickly. I think we'll maybe get us back on track. So the first slide, I just want to kind of talk about our footprint as Atmos Energy. And as it looks like there, that we're the largest natural gas only distribution company in the United States. And we deliver reliable, affordable, efficient, safe natural gas to about a little over 3 million customers in about 1,400 communities across 8 states. And I just talk about that so you can kind of see how broad scale we are. We're in 8 states, 6 divisions. You can see we're from Kentucky mid-states, Kentucky, Tennessee area to Colorado, Kansas, where we're at, down to Louisiana, and West Texas kind of is our southwest corner of the state, and then in between a lot of those areas. So the next one just kind of drills down. That's Atmos in general. The next one really kind of looks at our Kansas operations, and we've got about 140,000 customers in 106 communities. And on that previous slide, one thing I would note, there's about 77,000 miles of pipe that we operate. Well, Kansas, if you look, we're about 4,100 miles of that. And I listed on the left side, some of the communities that we serve, but our largest one's Olathe. We serve Olathe, parts of Lenexa, parts of Overland Park, down to Spring Hill and up as far as KCK. And then in the middle of the state, Yates Center, Harrington, Council Grove area, and then down the southeast part of the state in Independence, Kansas. And then we go all the way out west to Johnson City, Ulysses, and a lot of rural stuff in between. So we're kind of spread out, pretty big footprint. If I have to go, I got to pack a lunch to go visit the guys at the western part of our area. But just a couple of things in that slide I do want to point out. The $123 million capital investment from 2016 to date, and 85% of that is really safety and reliability focused. That's modernizing our system, replacing aging infrastructure, like you've heard a lot of others talk about. Very similar. I use a little different analogy too. I think Chuck used a really good analogy, but the car, you put tires on your car, you maintain it, you balance the tires, you check the air pressure, but there's still some useful life in those tires. Doesn't matter how much maintenance, how good you take care of them, they've got to be replaced at some point. That's really what that $123 million is doing, and we appreciate the opportunity to do that, and we look forward to even increasing that. And really another thing, and I'll show on another slide a little bit, even with that level of investment, we're still keeping our customers' bills affordable and also reducing emissions, which is part of our overall low carbon future goals as well. Just one thing I'll point out as well. So when I mentioned the 70,000, 7,000 versus the 41, the 139 out of the 3 million, that really gives us access to a lot of financial support, resource support, buying power. So it's really nice to be part of that larger corporate structure. In Kansas, we're fortunate to have that. So that means people, equipment, material, financial support, whatever. It's nice to be part of that larger corporate. And I know y'all talked about the municipal, so I'm just kind of drawing a little bit how that looks different from our perspective. And I think that's a very fortunate thing. The next slide I'll go through pretty quickly. That's one Patrick kind of talked about. Right there in the middle says the Atmos City Gate. That's where we take custody of the gas, and that's where we deliver it to the homes and businesses and industrial customers. So that in the energy cycle is kind of where we're at. So the next slide, again, kind of breaks it down even further. That's the blue, the main out in front, whether it's in the front or an easement in the back, wherever that may be. And then the service from the main to the house. That's what we do. And that meter on that house, that's us. So that's really what the local distributions companies do. And one thing I'll point out, when we talked about the System Integrity Project, SIP, we refer to sometimes that, and this we're actually going into our second year, that's the modernization, replacing aging infrastructure, and that's been a huge benefit. And I'll just say the same thing, it just pays dividends. Last winter was a perfect example. They talked about the reliability. We were 99.999%, whatever that is. I know the 4 customers that were out, and they were out momentarily. We even offered hotels to those folks if they needed them. They weren't even out long enough that their houses cooled down enough they took advantage of the hotel. So I literally know the 4 customers that were out due to that storm. So it's, I think that, to Patrick's point, that shows a lot of resiliency in the natural gas business. And then the regulators piece, the next slide, just talking a little bit about that, how we are regulated. Certainly the commission rates, local, directly, we work closely with the commission and CURB. PHMSA, the Pipeline Hazardous Material Safety Administration, that's a federal department. American Petroleum Institute, public awareness, communication, how we talk about damages in public awareness. OSHA, we're all familiar with OSHA. So those are just some of the examples, the EPA, that we work within on a federal level and at a state level. So extremely regulated. Seems like everybody in the world, they've got some jurisdiction that we comply with. So that's just to kind of give you an example of some of the regulation. And then the next page, just talking about, we've known for years that natural gas is extremely efficient. From the wellhead to the burner tip, it's 91 plus something percent efficient. We also know it's extremely affordable and a good value. And I just point out that middle number, that 27%, nearly a third of Kansans qualify for some type of energy assistance. So we know affordability is important. That's why I'm going to talk about that monthly bill. Just that's an average actual bill customer in the state of Kansas at $53 gas bill a month. So I think we're affordable, it's efficient, and I just wanted to share that because I know it's important to y'all's constituents. And the next one is kind of a plug for zero net energy home, ZNE home. We just completed one in Colorado. We're in the process of looking for partners to build one in Kansas, and it is exactly what it says. It's just a home that produces more energy than it consumes. So it's pretty cool, and I think it's just an example of bringing all the best of all the utilities together, the best that they offer, the collaboration, the coordination to create an affordable and clean energy solution. So we talk about that a lot, and I think this is a great example. It was a wonderful project and wonderful people we were able to give that home to, and we're going to do one in Kansas. So if you hopefully all hear more about it, and this will be maybe the first time you've heard ZNE or Zero Net Energy Home. You can say I heard that from Bart Armstrong. So well, we look forward to doing that. We're in the process of it now. The next one is really just kind of an overview. We talked about our being good stewards of the environment. And the thing I'll pull off that slide is that 50% reduction in our methane emissions from our mains and services. That's our goal by 2035. And that's just due to increase in technology, innovation, the opportunities to replace aging infrastructure. So I just didn't want to not include something about emissions reduction. And then the last slide that I think I will end is the Gus the Gopher. Shameless plug for our mascot, Gus the Gopher. In all of our meetings at Atmos, we always have some safety message. So I'm going to make this one ours. So damage prevention, over half of our hazardous leaks are due to third-party damage. So I would ask y'all to go back and encourage your folks, your constituents, call 811. It's a free service. We'll come out and locate your lines. It doesn't cost me a thing, and hopefully it keeps the gas in the pipe where it belongs and keep us from getting damaged. And anyway, so that's a shameless plug about Gus. I think y'all have one more slide, and it's really just a consolidation of a lot of what we talked about. Almost a million customers in Kansas rely on natural gas to heat their homes and water. So a lot of good stuff on that one pager. So that's really all I have, and I even beat my 15 minutes, I think, but I will take questions later as well. So thank you.
Armstrong. Next, we'll call up Stephen Cowan from Black Hills Energy. Our last presenter of the day.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Steve Cowan, Black Hills Energy. I'll be brief here as well, as everyone's covered so many great topics. On slide 2, you can see a little bit more about Black Hills Energy as a whole. We are a customer-focused, growth-oriented company. We have 1.3 million electric and natural gas utility customers in 8 states. Company headquarters is in Rapid City, South Dakota, hence the Black Hills Energy name. History dates back to the Deadwood Gold Rush and some folks providing power up there. Locally in Kansas, just like Kansas Gas Service and Atmos before you, we are a local distribution company providing gas to homes and businesses for 117,000 customers in 66 communities across the state. We have offices in service territory generally in Lawrence, Wichita, Southwest Kansas with Garden City, Liberal, and Dodge, as well as Goodland. 140 employees and over 4,500 miles of gas system infrastructure, about 330 miles of transmission, and the rest mains and service lines. On slide 4, our key strategic plans and priorities. Safety is always the #1 priority. That of our employees to return home as good or better than they came to work each day, and of our communities as well, like promoting 811, like Bart said, and we'll talk a little bit here about some of our ongoing investments for safety and reliability. We want to be a great company for our customers to do business with, whether it be online or on site. And we're definitely partners in the communities that we serve to make sure that we're all growing together. Safety and safe and reliable natural gas services is our utmost responsibility, and we have demonstrated a record of making investments in our system. On slide 6, we are amidst an accelerated replacement program that we initiated in 2018 to eliminate all obsolete pipe in our system in the state. This proactive program benefits customers and helps reduce risk and increase safety in the communities we serve. We have a process we go through every year to rank those projects to make sure we have the highest prioritization model to determine what to perform each year, trying to remove the bare steel, finished plastic, and PVC. It's in 2 phases, as you can see. There's a 7-year urban program and then a 10-year rural plan, so we can have an economical and systematic approach to our infrastructure replacement program. And we report on the results of that every year to our regulators. Slide 7, we did complete a regulatory rate review last year. It was our first rate case in about 7 years. A couple of the key drivers for that to recover the costs with our accelerated replacement program, we utilized the gas system reliability surcharge. That was set to expire and needed to be reset. This is something that was passed by the Kansas Legislature in 2006 and then updated again in 2018. And there's a certain time frame that you're allowed to recover GSRS revenues. And at the end of that time, you'll have to to reset that, you have to come in for a rate review. We also wanted to flow back through the benefits of state and federal tax reform for our customers, as well as other capital investments we've made. The end result of that, we had new rates effective at the beginning of this year. It's a net zero base rate revenue impact for customers. Basically, that gas system reliability surcharge revenue moved over into base rates. And for the next couple of years, for the non-gas portion of our customer bills, they will see a rate reduction. About $3 million a year in customer tax credits will flow back through for 3 years. Slide number 8, Winter Storm Uri. As mentioned, Justin did such a great job covering that storm last week. During the coldest temperatures of that event, our system, which is designed for those peak conditions, performed as intended, and we also didn't experience any significant interruptions in service. But we did incur those extraordinary gas costs, which Justin mentioned. We have a settlement agreement that has been reached with KCC staff and CURB and had an evidentiary hearing before the commission. And if that is approved by regulators, excuse me, customers would see about an average of $11.47 per month over a 5-year period, trying to mitigate the impacts and stretch that cost out over time. Slide number 9, I'll wrap up here real quick. We have our corporate sustainability report. We have similar greenhouse gas emissions reduction goals, about 50% by 2035 from our utility infrastructure system. Real quick, slides 11 and 12 highlight renewable natural gas. This is something where if the committee wants to take a deeper dive on, we have a great project manager on this in Nebraska we can have come speak to you. We're happy to talk offline about that. There's a lot of opportunities with capturing methane and biogases from landfill, wastewater treatment, ag waste, processing that and being able to put it in the natural gas pipeline system. We partner on a couple projects in Nebraska and Iowa and hope to be able to add to that story in Kansas as well. And on slide 13, just a couple items on energy assistance programs for our customers. If any of your constituents call, we have a lot of resources online. Black Hills Cares, which is customer donations that can be matched dollar for dollar by the foundation, by our company foundation, and are administered locally through Salvation Army. We're Warm Hearts of Douglas County, budget billing, and it is the low-income energy assistance program heating season. So with that, I'll wrap up here quickly and leave time for questions.
Thank you, Steve. Representative Carmichael, please state who your question is for.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is for Mr. Vogelsberg.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, sir. It looks like there's some good news at the KCC this morning. It looks like that your company, along with Atmos and others, has filed a unanimous agreement concerning the carrying charges, and sadly I don't have it in front of me at this moment, concerning the carrying charges associated with what I would call the amortization of the extraordinary costs associated with Winter Storm Uri. We just heard Mr. Cowan from Black Hills saying that they anticipate residential customers are going to see a rate increase of $11.47 a month, and I'm not sure for how long to pay off that extraordinary cost. But it looks to me like going from 8% carrying charge down to about 8.6% carrying charge down to about a 2% carrying charge is going to save my constituents money. And that's always good. So I hope you could explain that to us. And then secondarily, if time permits, I'd like to know, is there really any incentive for companies like yours under our present regulatory scheme to attempt to negotiate lower price contracts on behalf of your customers with the suppliers, fixed price contracts, hedged contracts, etc., to try to give us more security, if you will, the next time we have a major winter storm?
Thank you, Representative Carmichael, for those questions. So we do have those proceedings over at the KCC, and it is very fluid. And obviously, just this morning, there was a settlement filed, which that information would be public, and the committee could take a look at it. In regards to our overall financial plan that we'll be working forward and that the commission will ultimately rule on, I think what we have proposed is a payback of either 5, 7, or 10 years, and depending on how long that is, that would result in anywhere from $5 to $9 for a month for residential customers over the course of that. The costs were obviously very significant during that storm. Kansas Gas Service, like the others gas companies, we follow a gas supply plan with the commission every year, and shows, where are we going to get that gas supply from to meet our customers' demands, and then what is our contracting strategy. And our contracting strategy is a collection that has a portfolio of long-term contracts, short-term contracts, and storage contracts, and then some spot contracts. And obviously during Winter Storm Uri, any exposure to the daily rate was significant. I think our gas supply plan performed very well because our customers benefited from not only the physical hedge that gas in storage provided during that storm, but also benefited from the financial hedges that up to the extent that are approved by the KCC. As far as our incentive, I think our company, like I said, we don't make any money off of the cost of gas. I think it is in our best interest to have natural gas prices be as low as possible to be competitive with other forms of energy. And so in that sense, I think our interest as far as mitigating the overall price of that storm and natural gas prices going into the future, our interests are aligned with not only our customers, our regulator, and the legislature. We want the lowest prices as possible. And our gas supply plan, like I said at the beginning, it's filed every single year, and it's scrutinized by our regulator. And if there are any concerns about that, I'm sure KCC will bring that to bear.
With your
Representative Wahhabism.
Thank you.
We need to move on, Representative Carmichael. Representative Wahhabism.
I understand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, the question is for the gas company. I mean, anyone can answer, but you guys talk about investments in terms of infrastructure. What are you guys doing with respect to, we saw with the last year with respect to the storm that hit. What are you guys doing in terms of addressing cybersecurity in regards to gas well, individual customers, also for your company as well? What are you guys doing in terms of investment towards cybersecurity? And I don't know if Evergy can answer the same question as well with respect to what we saw in Texas. But I'll let you guys go first.
Cybersecurity is paramount. We've obviously seen recent issues of cybersecurity hitting pipelines and on the eastern side of the country. And so it's something that we're on top of every single day and have made significant investments in it. As far as overall what that looks like, overall dollar amounts, I would need to get back with you on those specific ones, but I'd be happy to turn it over to some of my counterparts.
Wonderful question, and probably, I would say, one of our top 1 or 2 daily concerns. So a couple things. One, we invest hundreds of millions of dollars over, between 2018 and now in protecting both our hard assets and our digital assets from attack. Nothing obviously is perfect, but within the industry, we're in the top decile in terms of what independent third parties would rank in terms of our cyber protections. What I would tell you is Kansas has a great asset in the Fusion Center. We actually have a member of our team that's read in and has classified security clearance and works with the Fusion Center out of Kansas. We do yearly drills on responses to cybersecurity. In fact, in 2021, I think we did 2. So it's a top risk, it's a top concern, and it's something that we work on literally every day.
Plan B, we do invest a lot of time. We've got people that's all they do. Even prior, you'd mentioned the cold weather storm, even prior to that. And after that, that's just something we always do. I would just say that our plan B, if need be, between operation technology, information technology, if we had to shut everything down and operate it like we did 40 years ago manual, we could do that today. So we know that we operate around Nashville, the Nashville bombing that happened several years ago, cylinders, some of those things. So those are always on our mind. We do a lot of tabletops, a lot of drills for that. And like I said, if we had to completely lose communications and operate manually, just like we used to in the old days, we could certainly do that to stop that. So,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Delperdang.
I could ask Mr. Cowan a quick question here. You brought up something kind of intriguing to me on the last page here with RNG, but in Wichita, in the north part of it, we've got this huge, I'm almost going to say, shutdown of landfill. I've been past there several times where they've got flares going with the methane release, but are you guys currently or have plans to get in there to maybe capture some of the gas?
I don't know about that project specifically, but the projects that we are partners in, they are landfills or former landfills that have been capped. They can be drilled down if they're capturing the methane already. You can have the process then on site to purify it. A lot of our partnership in these programs is, if we're going to go with the car analogy, making sure the car is safe to be on the road and giving it an on-ramp onto a pipeline system. And there's a lot of different partnerships maybe that are involved in those. But yeah, we're always looking and interested in projects, but that's traditionally what they've been so far. It's landfill and wastewater.
Yeah, I would personally like to hear more about it in the future. I don't know if we could arrange it through the committee, but you've got my intrigue. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll definitely follow up, and it's a pretty interesting area right now for the natural gas industry. So,
All right, committee, just to, again, context, we've now heard from the upstream, midstream, and downstream folks in the natural gas industry. We heard from Evergy today, so we've got IOUs and Liberty, the other IOU in the state. As I said, now they're number 2. Putting it into context, next week, we're going to turn our attention to the telecom part of our committee title. We're going to hear from those folks on Tuesday. Thursday, we have a hearing on a resolution that I introduced back at the beginning of the year, encouraging investigations into price gouging by our Attorney General and by FERC as a result of the winter storm. And then we're going to start talking about electric vehicles a little bit and some of the challenges and opportunities that exist as major car manufacturers begin to electrify their fleets over the, already started, but as they move to the place where that will be, sounds like 100% of their fleets within about 15 years. So look forward to those presentations and the hearings next week. Thank the committee for its time and attention. Thank our presenters and conferees today. Appreciate that very much. If there's nothing else for the good of the order, we are adjourned.